Hey there, my friends. Why do some people run from good relationships? If there's one thing that'll scare people off more than a bad relationship, it's typically a good relationship. It doesn't make any sense, at least not logical sense, because I don't think it's a logical phenomenon. I think it's an emotionally based phenomenon. So based on not logical logic, but emotional logic, it makes sense why some of us run from good relationships. So as we jump into this, or why are we jumping into this, I might ask and pretend that it's you asking, because a lovely viewer wrote in, asked me a lovely question. I'm going to share that background with you. And if you have run from good relationships, and if you are currently a runner, maybe like a ultra endurance marathon athlete at running from good relationships, then I'd invite you to listen up. And the details from this viewer's little bit of a background I'll read you, they're probably not exactly what your background details are, yet I would guess you'll have your version of it to some extent. So, on with the show. Lovely lady asks, or writes in a little background first, I had a bad relationship with my dad. He was very absent. He had PTSD from escaping a dictatorship in Uruguay, which basically meant he was an absent dad. Wasn't really fit to be a dad. That led me in the past to experience a couple of terrible, abusive relationships with boyfriends. And we go on. I'm happy to say that after years of therapy and inner exploration, I'm now free from attracting destructive partners. And I can honestly say that the daddy issues chapter is closed. Dad passed away 2 years ago, and I made peace with him before he died. This being said, I just met this guy who I really like, who seems to like me back. He's kind, he's respectful, and he's really cute. That's important. Long story short, the idea of dating a guy with whom there is a possibility of something real down the road is giving me a lot of anxiety. And I feel very triggered. That's honest. And that doesn't make any logical sense. Keep in mind, this is an emotional phenomenon. So concluding, she says, so the question I have is, how do I embrace my vulnerability and how insecure I feel? How can I be myself in this particular situation, but at the same time not burden him with it and scare him off? Because in this case, it really has nothing to do with him. It's really just the idea of a relationship in itself, which is a mega trigger. That's important. Knowing that it has nothing to do with him. That's super aware of you. That's wonderful. Anyway, I really like this guy and I don't want to scare him off. I need to bring my anxiety levels down soon. I read that off a piece of paper so that I could contribute to killing a tree. It's just how I am. A little passive-aggressive of me. So, what's important here is you're finally in what looks like a good relationship, a nice guy. He's cute. That's great. He treats you respectfully. So here you are, filled with anxiety, getting triggered, and of course conscious enough to not just blindly run away, but feel that anxiety that maybe wants to make you run away. So why is this happening? And the other important question is, how can I be myself in this relationship? Here's a couple things I'd ask you to consider right off the bat. That important question, how can I be myself here? I would dare say your willingness to tolerate your discomfort of being in a new type of relationship is going to be very necessary for you to actually be yourself. What I would guess your anxiety is saying, getting triggered, what that's really saying is, I don't feel like my old self in this relationship. My familiar sense of self, who I think I am in relationship to others, in relationship to my father, in relationship to ex-boyfriends, I don't feel like that person in this relationship here in the now. And when I don't feel like I'm myself, it's very scary. To not have my sense of self in this relationship is very scary. So, just to make it my opinion clear here, I think that anxiety is really arising because not that you're not being yourself here, but you are not being your familiar sense of self, who you were to your father, who you were to ex-boyfriends, which is someone who's abused. You were a victim. You were someone who was ignored. You were someone who was not respected. And because this lovely, cute guy is not offering you abusive, neglectful behavior, it's not possible for you to be who you were in this relationship. So it's just like if you had your whole identity stolen from you, your driver's license, your passport, your credit cards, you were stripped of your name, stripped of your identity, stripped of who you think you are. That's going to be a very anxious feeling. It really is. And that's normal. And I think that's what's happening here. Part of you is challenging you to not be who you were, but to be who you are. And who you are, I would guess, is not who you think you are. So there's a gap here. Who I think I am, probably very familiar relative to the old you. Who you think you are versus who you are. That gap in between, as you get to know yourself, you have to travel the distance of this gap. That's anxiousness. That's fear. That's not feeling at home. And that's necessary. There's a reason why lots of men, lots of women will continuously get into abusive relationship after abusive relationship. Why? Because it's way more comfortable. It's like, well, JP, I don't know if you've ever been abused, buddy, but being abused is not comfortable. I get that. It's physically painful and emotionally painful, and I would dare say it's incredibly comforting relative to the familiar sense of self we've built up through our childhood experiences of being abused. So it's easy for people to stay here because it means they don't have to go through the mysterious dark forest, the space in between who I was and who I actually am. So I think really what we're saying here is perhaps the anxiety that you're getting triggered in this relationship is the sensations you're experiencing as you're getting to know yourself. Not who you thought you were, not who you think you are, not who you were relative to dad or ex-boyfriends, but getting to know who you actually are. It's a very anxious experience because she's a stranger. She is you, and she is a stranger. So I would dare say it's important to allow the discomfort to be there. Trying to resist the discomfort is what can drive you into living hell and what can drive you into reverting into past patterns. Ditch the new, lovely, respectful guy and go find someone else who will allow you, or better yet, a man who you will allow yourself to become who you were in the presence of. So a willingness to tolerate that discomfort, I think, is incredibly necessary. And I would also invite you to even go, in addition to just accepting the anxiety, breathing with it, feeling with it, all easier said than done, but there's got to be space for it. I would also invite you to go underneath the anxiety. There's always going to be a deeper fear, maybe a deeper shame. So I would dare say you have a little girl living inside of your adult woman body who feels like an abandoned, lonely orphan. You got to attend to her. You got to pay attention to her. Otherwise, she's going to reactively grab the only life jacket that she can possibly see as she's floating around in the mystery of drifting into who she is. And that familiar life jacket, the only life jacket around, is her old sense of self. So that's why I would challenge you got to be there for that lonely, abandoned, frightened little child inside of you. And let her be scared. Let part of you have an understanding of why this part of you is scared. The adult logical brain will say, don't be scared. This is like just an awesome guy. Why are you scared when we're in a better situation now? That's stupid of you. Well, that'll just make her more scared. It'll make her feel even more discounted, even lonelier. Looking at your inner child's absolutely illogical fears and doing your best to allow them, understand them, and feel them, I think is incredibly important. Easier said than done. And saying easier said than done is easy to say. That's actually easy to do as well. So, the other thing I just want to invite you to consider here, you mentioned your daddy issue chapter is closed. Well, I'd invite you to maybe keep the chapter closed, but make sure you keep the book open, because like any good book, one chapter will lead into the next chapter. So yeah, close the chapter, move on, but don't close the book, because I would dare say, yes, your daddy issues, you've worked with them. Good for you. That is really important. You wouldn't be able to even be having this conversation if you haven't done a lot of work on them. Are you still influenced by them? Sounds like absolutely. However, I would dare say you're at a new level of consciousness with them. Chapter 1 or chapter 2, whatever chapter you've just closed, cool. You've moved beyond that. And now you're at the next chapter. And your daddy issues are still there to be dealt with, only a new, deeper layer of them, I would dare say. Getting to know who you are, not relative to an absentee abusive father, is the next phase of your daddy issues, I would guess. Lastly, there's a question alluded to, like, okay, with the new guy, the new boyfriend, how do I navigate that? Do I share this stuff with him? Do I not share this stuff with him? I don't want to scare him off. But I think you also have the wisdom to know you don't want to scare yourself off. You don't want to conceal yourself from this guy, or else it's not a real relationship with him. It's just the facade, the superficial experience of a connection, not a communion. So here's my opinion I'd like to throw at you. Do your best to be incredibly open, honest, and vulnerable with this guy. If he scares you off, then he doesn't deserve you. If you scare him off, then he doesn't deserve you. I might have screwed that up the first time. And I would dare say, you sharing your real vulnerabilities with him about what's going on in you, that's you sharing your heart. And when I say sharing your heart, I don't just mean the soft, fluffy, silky rose petal part of your heart. That's part of it. Let that be there. And there's also the other part of your heart that feels fear, that feels anxiety, that's wounded from your past. That part of your heart also needs to be shared, or else you're just not sharing your heart with him. You're not even giving him a chance, and therefore not even giving yourself a chance. So, to help you do that in a way that honors you, honors him, rather than disrespecting you and disrespecting him and potentially scaring him off, I would invite you to make sure you own your experiences. When you get triggered, tell him what it is about yourself that's making you triggered. Avoiding the trap of, you made me triggered when you did this. No, based on what you shared, your trigger isn't about him. It's about your past experiences, and more significantly, you taking a monumental step of growing beyond your past experiences. So not only owning your experience of what your trigger's about, but also sharing with him what from your past is being triggered here. Share with them why the trigger is coming up. I'm getting triggered, and here's what this says about my past, what I've lived through. That's intimacy. Owning your triggers. Not projecting them onto him, but owning them. Making sure you ambitiously claim responsibility for them. And also sharing with him what you've experienced in the past that's brought the trigger up. Blame will scare people away. But this is self-ownership. A self-ownership, in my opinion, but it's intimacy with self. It's accepting yourself. That, to me, is one of the most attractive qualities I could ever see in a partner. And if this guy leads with his heart, I think he'll like it. And if he doesn't lead with his heart, then you get the opportunity to find someone who does. So all of that, it's not easy. It really isn't. But you're at I think, a very focal point here in your hero's journey of leaving who you were so that you can journey into the magnificence of who you really are. There's a dark forest to walk through when we do that. Yes, it's scary, but it beats being in the familiar wasteland of who we're not, even though it's who we think we are. So enjoy the thrills, the spills, the anxieties, the exhilarations, and the intimacy of getting to know yourself to a deeper degree while you're in a relationship with this lovely person. Which, by the way, if you weren't in a relationship with a person who treats you respectfully, treats you differently than people in your past, then there's a real good chance that you wouldn't have the environment to trigger these parts of you that are you, but they're unknown parts of you. You wouldn't have the environment that would be challenging you to make your unconscious conscious. So it's challenging, yet I would dare say incredibly purposeful. So I really appreciate you, lovely person, for throwing your question my way. This is at most some food for thought. And for the rest of you lovely people who have had the experience of running from a good relationship, I hope you have something here to contemplate on. Whatever, insert your own proper vocabulary there. And with that said, if you've yet to subscribe to my YouTube channel, I'd invite you to build a healthy relationship with the subscribe button, and I'll look forward to talking with you guys next time.